Good morning, all of you. My name is Bhatia, and this is our class of BHIC 133 History program. And we are going to cover in this class Unit 12 and Unit 13. Delhi Sultanate time period is 12th, 13th century to 14th century. And what about Mughal period? 16th to 17th century. And we are talking about inland trade in Unit 12. Inland trade. Trade and commerce under the Delhi Sultanate. Because in these two units, Unit 12 and Unit 13, we are going to cover about trade, commerce, and export, import, and revenue system. We will cover these things in our Unit 12 and Unit 13. First of all, we are going to cover about trade and commerce under Delhi Sultanate. There emerged some considerably big flourishing towns as well as numerous townships during the 13th, 14th centuries. These towns naturally needed to be fed and supplied raw material for craft production. At the same time, there was growing practice of land revenue realization in cash. But the time of Alauddin Khalji, have you heard about Alauddin Khalji? He has done a lot of reforms. He has done a lot of reforms related to commerce, related to trade, related to market system, and so many things. He had defined a lot of things related to that. And in Alauddin, by the time of Alauddin Khalji, the cash nexus came to be well developed, and the ruling class tended to claim almost the entire peasant surplus by attempting to reduce the share of rural intermediaries, as we have seen in the previous units. Alauddin Khalji has done a lot of things, just like in our earlier class, we have studied about these things also. Alauddin Khilji had fixed all the things rates, had fixed the rates of all the things, just eating the just food material and the clothes material and wearing material and the floor material and all things. He had fixed the rates so that nobody can cheat to anybody like this. Next, inland trade. Inland trade developed at two levels. Two levels means the short distance, village town trades, and in communities of bulk. And second thing is long distance inter town trade in high value goods. Village town trade, as already explained, was a natural consequence of the emergence of towns and realization of land revenue in cash. The urban centers were dependent for supply of food, grains, raw material for manufacturers from the surrounding villages, whereas the villages had to sell the agricultural products to receive cash for meeting the land revenue demand. The peculiar nature of this trade was a one-way flow of commodities. While the town received grains, raw material from the villages in the vicinity, they had no need to send their products in exchange to the villages where were by and large self-sufficient. Inland trade, short distance village town trade and long distance inter town trade. Both trades are different. Next is overland trade. Overland trade during the Sultanate period, because in all type of trades we will discuss about firstly Delhi Sultanate period, and secondly we will discuss about Mughal time period. But in during Sultanate period, overland trade was in a flourishing state. Multan was a major trading center for overland trade. India was connected to Central Asia, Afghanistan, Persia through the Multan-Quetta road. But on account of repeated Mongol turmoil in Central Asia and Persia, this route was less preferred by the merchants. Less preferred by the merchants. Next is commercial classes. Commercial classes means those classes and those people and those groups who were immersed in the commercial activities, just like trade, just like export, import, market system, and all. These were known as the commercial classes who connected to commerce. Two types of merchants are mentioned in the sources of Delhi Sultanate. First one is Karwanis or Nayaks and Multanis. The merchants specializing in carrying grains were designated by Burni as Karwanis. It can be said that with a degree of certainty that these Karwanis were the Banjaras. Banjaras of succeeding centuries. Banjaras, have you heard about Banjaras? A very old word which we use for the Banjaras. Just like Banjaras are moving from here to there and in search of food, in search of pasture land, in search of cattle, in search of land that will be very helpful to fed their cattle. And they were doing a small business just like handicraft, weaving work, and lot of things just like this. And they move from one place to another after every 6 months, after every 3 months. They were known as Banjaras. As is clear from the Mughal sources, these were organized in groups, and their headman was called Nayak. The other important group of merchants mentioned in our sources was that of the Multanis. First of all, we have studied about Banjaras, and the head of Banjaras were known as Nayaks. And next is Multanis. Burni says that the long distance trade was in the hands of these merchants. Long distance trade. They were engaged in usury and commerce. It appears that the Sahas and Multanis were rich enough to give loan even to nobles, who, according to Burni, were generally in need of cash. The merchants who need cash, and they give who gave Multanis and Sahas, they give a lot of cash to the merchants whenever they need at that time. Next is the another important commercial class that emerged during the Sultanate period was that the dalals. Dalals means the brokers, means the mediator. They worked as a link between buyer and the seller and took permission from both the parties. Means buyer and the sellers. The dalals, they took permission from the both parties. And Bernie says that they were the masters of market. Masters of market means Hakiman Bazaar. They were instrumental in raising prices in the market. Whenever they raise the price in the market, and they will be the responsible for that thing, just like Alauddin Khilji used to consult them about the cost of production of every article in the market in order to fix prices, because he wanted to fix the price of every commodity, of everything which was held in the market, which was kept in the market. He wanted to fix all the prices because he did not want to cheat to any other person with the help of these things, so that so he had fixed the prices. Means, and next is Sarraf. Sarraf was another mercantile group whose economic role was no less important than the brokers. Earlier we have studied about brokers, we have studied about dalals, and now we are talking about Sarraf. Sarraf were another mercantile group whose economic role was no less than the brokers. As money changers, just like you can say, if any other countries people entered into our country and they need to change their currency, and they meet at that time to Sarraf to change the currency of that particular area. Next is means of transport. If we are talking about trade, commerce, and all things, then after these things, second important thing was means of transport. Then, if we produce anything, then what type of transport we will cover? It appears that the goods were transported both by pack animals and on bullock carts. Perhaps the share of the pack animals was more than the latter. Ibn Battuta, Ziauddin Burni, a lot of scholars have described about the means of transport of that particular Delhi Sultanate time period and Mughal time period. Even to do the mentions, 30,000 mans of grains being transported on the backs of 3,000 bullocks from Amroha to Delhi. Bullock carts were also used according to a fee for carrying passengers on payment. They use that the people who carry grains and they transport that grain to another country, to another city, just like Delhi to Amroha and Amroha to Delhi. Means they used pack animals and bullock carts both for means of transport. Next is trade and commerce under the Mughals. Earlier we have talked about Delhi Sultanate and how they did all the things. Now we are talking about at the time of Mughals how they changed their commerce, their trade under the Mughal period. And in Mughal period we are talking about inland trade. Okay, land revenue. Land revenue was realized in cash. First of all, if the ruler will get the revenue of that time, then this will be the salary of that particular ruler. If the emperor want to spend some money on their empire, then he needs a lot of cash, and cash in type of revenue in type of cash. This means that the surplus agricultural produce was to be sold. Bulk of this produce was sold in the village itself. Bulk of most of this purchase was made by banjaras, the traditional grain merchants. They in turn carried it to other towns and the markets. Tavernier, a French traveler who came to India in second half of 17th century, what he says that in almost every village could be bought rice, flour, butter, milk, vegetables, sugar, and other sweets. In some villages, even sheep, goat, fowl, etc. were available. According to him, every big village would have even a saraf or money changer. In addition, every locality had markets in the nearby towns where people from the surrounding areas would come to buy and sell the things. Apart from these regular markets, there were haats and pants where people from the villages could exchange or buy things of their daily need. These haats or pens were periodic markets, just like Tuesday market, just like Wednesday market, just like Saturday markets. These type of markets called pans and hats, and these type of markets which were held on a fixed days in a week. Sometimes there were hats for specific goods. Hats. Have you heard about Delhi Hat? There were a lot of things, and that is very interesting place to go over there. Hats and weekly markets. And we have talked about inland trade in Mughal time period. Next is inter-regional trade, means region wise. During the period of our study, trade between different regions of India was quite developed. Considering the time consuming and expensive mode of transport, such large scale inter-regional trade was phenomenally high in volume. Goods produced at one place were carried to long distance of hundreds and in some cases thousands of miles for the purpose of trades. Long distance trade we are talking about. Here products from Bihar, Orissa and some parts of Bengal were brought. Bengal supplied food grains to all parts of the country. Rice and sugar from Patna also brought to the market of Bengal. Textiles. Now we are talking about textiles. Textiles of all sorts from Bihar, Banaras, and Jaunpur could be bought in Bengal. Yes, different things from different region. They trade with each other and they exchange the things with each other. In North, if we are talking about North side, Agra received large quantities of silk from Bengal. Carpets, textiles from Awadh region were taken to Gujarat, Bengal, Patna, Lahore, and Multan. The saffron and wood products and fruits and woolen shawls, etc., from Kashmir found their way to the markets of North, West, and the East India. Kashmir supplied ice to Lahore, Multan, Agra, and Delhi. Paper from Shahjadpur near Allahabad were taken to all parts of country. Paper. Next, how they did their exports and imports, of which states, of which regions they export the things and they import the things. We are talking about 16th and 17th century. The 16th and 17th century also India had a flourishing trade with a large number of foreign countries. The significant aspect of foreign trade during this period is coming of the Europeans. Yes, at the time of Mughals, the Europeans came to India and they trade with each other. This increased India's foreign trade manifold. Most of this trade was in the form of exports of Indian goods, and the imports were very small. Exports, what were exports? Textiles, saltpetre, indigo formed a major share of Indian exports because these type of things were very much famous and very much fond of in other European countries. That's why they export these things a lot of. And other important items were sugar, opium, spices, and other sundry commodities. Next, textiles. Textile production in India had reached new heights during this period. The increasing exports contributed to the increase in production at that time. Next, what is saltpetre? So, saltpetre, one of the important ingredients for making gunpowder, was much in demand in Europe. There are no references to its export in the 16th century. In the 17th century, the Dutch started exporting it from Coromandel coast. Soon, the English also followed that. Next is indigo. Indigo means blue dye. Blue dye was produced in most of northern India like Punjab, Sindh and Gujarat. The indigo from Sarkhes means Gujarat and Bayana near Agra was much in demand for exports. Prior to its supply to Europe, large quantities of this commodity were exported to Persian Gulf from Gujarat. Silver was the main item of import as it was brought to finance the purchases of European companies and other from different parts of Europe and Asia. Copper. Copper was imported in some quantity. Lead and mercury were other important commodities brought to India. Silk and porcelain from China was imported into India by the English. Good quality wine, carpets, and perfumes were brought from Persia. These things import from other countries and other cities. Now you can see the trade routes and means of transport. How they connect trade routes from the very famous cities at that time. Here you can see the dots. Dots means the way how they transport their things to each other cities. Just like Delhi, Agra, Lucknow, Patna. Yes, this way is just like a similarly. Ajmer, Allahabad, and after that Bahrampur. Next, after that Aurangabad, Hyderabad. These were the trade routes which they connected with each other. Inland trade routes. The major land routes in India in 17th century, how they connected with each other. Now you can see transport, land transport, river transport, and air transport. These three types of transport. But at that time, air transport was not prevalent. At that time, land transport was with the help of bullock cart and with the help of pack animals, they help each other. Next is river transport. River played a very big role during the transport. Like while moving in the direction of the flow of the river, it was much faster. If you want to send anything to that particular area where the flow of river was going at that time, that will be very fast. Generally, it took less than half the time than by road. At the same time, river transport was cheaper also. For example, from Multan to Thatta, the goods by river would cost rupees 3/4 per mound. while for a shorter distance by land, it would cost around rupees 2 per mount. That is the difference. Now you can see related to this map, major trade routes. Dash dash was known as sea route and the dot dot was known as overland trade route. Now you can see the difference between sea route and the trade route, overland trade route. These were the ways by which they connect with each other. Trade routes. Yes. Now next going to start about the administration and the trade. How they administrate, their empire at that time. They administrate and trade their with the help of taxes, with the help of land revenue. That was the very in a big amount at that time, and the revenue will be very much helpful in running their empire. Every time the merchandise was sold, a certain tax was to be paid. Certain tax means three-fourths, one half, and two-fourths. And we do not have enough data to calculate the exact rate of taxation. What was the exact rate of taxation at that time? The general accounts suggest that these taxes were quite harsh. And how they quite harsh means when the tax collectors came to the people to collect the tax, then they treat very harshly with the peoples. That is the thing which we are talking about, the harsh conditions. Next is customs and transit duties. Like if any goods, if the type of goods were transported to other region, one region to another region, then the traders would have to pay the transit dues, would have to pay the custom duties at that time. Because if they cross the particular line of that particular region and they enter into another region, then they will have to pay the custom duty. Next is when goods were taken from one place to another. Information on the rate of custom levies. All merchandise brought through the ports was taxable. Abul Fazl, who had written Aine Akbari, Abul Fazl says that during Akbar's time, the duties did not exceed 2.5%. One early 17th century account suggests that at Surat, the charges were 2.5% on goods, 3% on provisions, 2% on money, gold and silver, 5%. Aurangzeb levied separate transit taxes for separate groups. The rate fixed was two half from Muslims, 5% from Hindus, and 3.5% from foreigners. These rates were applicable throughout the empire. These type of taxes they opposed and they played a very important role at that time. Personnel of trade and commercial practices under the Mughals. Personnel of trade. In the whole commercial process means trade, export, import, certain specialized groups of merchants, brokers, and serafs, they played their role at various levels. Just like talking about banjaras. They procured a number of animals. They have a lot of animals and move from one place to another place, buying and selling goods. And Jahangir in his Tajuke Jahangiri, the book, the record, the Tanjuke Jahangiri records in this country, the Banjaras are a fixed class of people who possess 1,000 oxen, more or less, varying in numbers. They bring grain from villages to towns and also accompany armies. Yes, next is merchants in different regions. Means we are talking about different regions, how the merchant activities were prevailing at that time. An important Vaishya. Have you heard about Varna system? Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. We are talking about Vaishya caste. An important Vaishya subcaste, that is Baniyas, were the leading merchants in the North India and Deccan. They belong to Indian countries. Their counterparts were in Punjab and Komatis in Golconda. These were type of Baniyas. They were type of Vaishya subcaste. The word Banya is derived from Sanskrit word Vanik. Earlier, we are talking about Vanik. We are discussing about Vanik. At that time, in Mughal period, we are talking about this Banya, meaning merchant. Many of Banyas carried surnames pointing to place of the origin. The Agarwals came from Agora, Oswals from Osi in Marwar. They were no names. Marwar gave probably the highest number of traders who are generally referred to as Marwaris. They were to be found in all parts of India and were the most eminent merchant group. Means we are talking about Vanik, Banyas, Agarwals, Oswals, Marwaris. They were known as merchant communities, and they played a very important role in business in commerce also. Chetis. Chetis was one such group. Just like that, this term is derived from Sanskrit means Seth, Shreshti. As we talked about Sethi. Sethi means who give loan to other persons when they in need. Perhaps Cheti were very wealthy merchants. The merchants along the Coromandel coast up to Orissa were known as Kling, Komatis. Yes, they were also known as, okay, they give loan to the particular peasant and they take interest from that on that particular money. In towns and bigger places also, merchants acted as money lenders. Another category among the personnel of trade which played a significant role was that of sarrafs. Sarraf means money changers, bankers, and the traders of gold, silver, and jewelry. The first two functions need some elaboration. Next is brokers, who were known as interregional, the foreign trade. They became crucial. Merchants from foreign and distant regions dependent on them. Commercial practices. How they practice their commercial things with each other, just like money lenders, just like bankers. They use all things just like during this period, hundis or bills of exchange became an important part of monetary transaction. Means hundis. Hundis was a paper document promising payment of money after a period of time at a certain place. To begin with, the practice started because the problems involved in carrying large amounts of cash for commercial transactions. The merchants interested in carrying cash to a particular place would deposit it with a saraf who would issue a hundi to the merchant banking, usury, rate of interest, and partnership. Hundi. Understood? Next is banking. How they connect with each other with the help of banking. Means when the Sarraf, apart from issuing bills of exchange, also received money for safe deposit, this was returned to the depositor on demand. The depositor was paid some interest on his deposits. The rate of interest payable to depositors kept changing. The rates available for Agra, just like this is an example for 1645 and Surat for 1630 works out to be approximately 9.5% per annum. That is a big amount. Bankers in turn would give money on loan to the needy on a higher rate of interest. When the people in need and they take a higher rate of interest from them. We get a number of references where state officers gave money from treasury to these bankers and kept the interest with them. Usury and rate of interest, money lending for personal needs and commercial purposes was an specialized practice. Much of trading was conducted through the money taken on interest generally, the sarraf and the merchants both indulge in money lending. Sometimes the money lenders were called sah, a distinct category that is known as sah. The loans were taken from various purposes. The money was taken on loan by peasants for paying revenue and repaid at harvest. Nobles enjoyed for the day-to-day expenses and repaid at the time of revenue collection. Money lending for business purpose was also very common at that time. Money lending. Next is insurance. As the present time, we things just like this in the Delhi Sultanate period and in Mughal period at the time of trade, at the time and in the practice prevalent in India on a limited scale was that of insurance or bima. In many cases, the sarraf used to take responsibility for the safe delivery of goods. The English factory records also refer to the insurance of goods, both inland and overseas also. Insurance played a very important role in our business, in our commercial activities at the time of present time and past time also. Next is merchants, trading organization and the state. How merchants, how they organize their trading things and with the help of the state. Have you heard about the guild system? Guild system means the group of merchants which in which they involved in the same business. In the same business, like they were make their guilds and they will make their organizations. Okay, which they frame their rules. The rules and laws governing the day-to-day business were generally framed by the business community itself. Merchants had their own guilds and their own organizations, which framed rules and regulation for their groups. We get references to such organizations in our sources. In Gujarat, these were called Mahajans. The first quarter of 18th century, it means in Mughal period, we get evidence of 53 Mahajans and Ahmedabad. The Mahajan was the organization of traders dealing in a specific commodity in a particular area, irrespective of their caste. The term Mahajan, what is the term Mahajan? The Mahajan was at times used for big merchants, also probably because they were the heads of their organizations, means they were heads of their guilds. There were separate caste-based organization also. The most influential and wealthy merchant of the town was called Nagar Seth. Sometimes treated as a hereditary title, Nagar Seth was a link between the state and trading community. Yes, this was the link. Next, you can see the how the oceanic trade was helping at that time. Oceanic trades, how the people of that particular time they trade with each other with the help of the oceans. Now you can see in unit 13 we will cover these oceanic trade, the major seaports in 13th to 15th century. In this you can see the oceanic trade, just like Maldives Island, Colombo, Cochin, Calicut, Bhatkal, Goa, Daman and Diu, they were connected with each other. They were known as oceanic trade. They connected to each other from one place to another. They export, they import their things with each other. Just like Ceylon, Nagapattam, Masulipattnam, just like Hooghly, this. Because we are talking about, can you see the south portion and center portion and south portion of India? They connected with each other. Okay. Next, we are going to start about the request made by Zamorin of Calicut. In 1498, to Vasco da Gama gives a clue to commodities. Have you heard about Vasco da Gama? In 1498, he found Calicut, the port of Calicut. The clue to the commodities that were imported into the Malabar and Konkan coast. Yes, you can see the Malabar and Konkan coast in this map. Malabar coast and the Konkan coast. Next is, he had asked for gold. Who had asked? Vasco da Gama. He had asked for gold, silver, coral and scarlet. Alfonso de Albuquerque, the Portuguese governor of Goa, they gave a list of commodities to the King of Portugal in 1513 that could be marketed in India. This included items like coral, just like copper, quicksilver, and vermilion, and brocades, velvet, carpets, saffron, rose water, clothes of various kinds. All these items were not from Portugal, but the Portuguese started procuring them from various places, just like Flanders, just like Germany, England, and other European countries. For example, damask, lead, and cinnabar, gold from Sofala, French and English linen clothes, Ellen stone, tin, opium, steel, Genoa, velvet, scarlet from Florence, red cloth from London, clothes from Holland, and raw and worked corals, etc., were brought to India. Yes, from these sea routes, oceanic trade routes, they connected with each other, just like they export and they import all the things with each other. That is the connection of these countries with each other. Next, we are talking about North and Western India. Northern India and Western India. Just like we are talking about indigo, and the Europeans were very much fond of indigo at that time, and they export indigo a lot of indigo textiles of various types, and the silks and the items like handicraft made of tortoise shells, etc., were collected from northwestern India from for export to Portugal. Taffeta was one of the expensive export varieties. Satin, chintz, malmal, striped cotton clothes, and the cambric muslin, silk scarf, Golconda muslins, and various other variety of silks. Products available in Chaul, Dabhol, and the ports of Gujarat. They were exported to Portugal. Silk, chawl, darbol, exported to Portugal because the Portuguese were very much fond of these things from connected to India. Among these items, silks were produced in places just like Behranpur, Balaghat, chins in Cambay, calico in vicinity of Daman, and Guinao in Cambay and Balaghat. Textile products increased in the 17th century. They connected with these things, and they import these things from northwestern part of India, and they were very much fond of these things, just like silks, just like various type of handicraft. Handicraft, it was made of tortoise shell. Do you know what is tortoise shell? Tortoise shells, and that thing was very much helpful for the handicraft for the northwestern Indian, and they export these things to Portugal. Cotton clothes, very much famous in India, and they export cotton, silk, muslin, and malmal and the satin. These clothes were very much famous in other countries, just like they export. That's why they export these clothes to Portugal. Next, we are talking about eastern coast, just like Bengal. है ना? What things were very much famous in Bengal? Just like we are talking about textiles of various kinds constituted the chief export from the eastern coast of India. Textiles. Textiles just like sandalwood. Sandalwood from the Coromandel was an important item of export to Portugal. Sandalwood, very big fragrance which came from sandalwood, and that is very helpful in the trading system with the Coromandel and with the Portuguese. And that next is spikenard was cultivated in Bengal, and this was brought to Cochin to be exported to Portugal. The most expensive item of export from this region was pearl. Very expensive pearl, chiefly collected from the pearl fishery coast. Pearl fishery coast near Coromandel. Near Coromandel coast, they collect the very precious thing, very precious metal that is known as pearl, and they export this into Portugal. Embroideries from Bengal were exported by the Portuguese. Embroidery from Bengal exported by the Portuguese. Ginger, ginger in conserve, myrobalance, butter, oil, wax, rice. These were the things, the other commodities that were collected from Bengal, and they export this to other countries. Yes, in the eastern coast, these type of things were very much famous. That's why they connected with each other, connected with Bengal. Now, some famous things in Southeast Asia. Various type of spices. Have you heard about spices? Yes, a various type of spices that are very much tasty and very much tasty, and the taste of spices in India that is different from other country. Various types of spices were collected from Ceylon and other Southeast Asian regions. For example, Malacca, Java, furnished pepper for export, and another is Moluccas. Moluccas produce good variety of cloves. Cloves is also a type of spice. The best sort of cinnamon was flourished by Ceylon, formed for export to Lisbon. Timor and Tenserim produced good variety of sandalwood, which was carried by the Portuguese to Lisbon. Sumatra provided stealing wax for Portuguese consumption. These were the things they connected with each other. Portuguese, Lisbon, how they import that things from their countries. Next, how they finance with each other, with the help of coins, with the help of bankers, with the help of what things, like European merchant financiers. Indian commodities also attracted the German financiers and merchants. Indian commodities also attracted the German financiers and the merchants. Difficult to finance the Oriental enterprise on his own. That's why he welcomed them with open arms. Since copper was given in part payment for Indian commodities, especially pepper and other spices, large quantity of copper was needed for transactions. Some of the German merchant financiers, like the Fuggers, had a monopoly over the production of copper in Europe. This turned out to be of great use for trade with India. The German financiers could fit out their vessels, entrust cash and commodities to India House in Lisbon to be taken to India under the Portuguese flag, and they buy the commodities from Lisbon according to the terms and the conditions of the contracts signed. Next is Indian merchants and rulers. How they connected with each other. Indian merchants and Indian rulers. Several Indian merchants supplied commodities to Portuguese on credit when the latter did not have cash or commodities to furnish to exchange. The merchants of Cochin, especially the marketers, especially the Marakkars, who were of great help to the Portuguese in this respect, and their services were gratefully remembered by the Portuguese officials. Sometimes the Portuguese king was persuaded to grant some privileges to such merchants. Khwaja Shamsuddin Gilani, who had settled down in Sinanoor after his services to the kingdom of Bijapur, was often helpful to Portuguese in finding necessary funds on loan. Next, nature of Portuguese trade with India. How they trade, how the Portuguese trade with India. What was the nature? Had they monopoly on trade? The Portuguese demanded monopoly of trade. The treaties concluded with the Indian rulers specifically mentioned this. The setting up of Portuguese fortresses or strategic places, surveillance by their patrolling vessels, and emphasis on passes for ships were made to establish monopoly of trade in Asian waters. Next is trade of Indian rulers and the merchant. Trade of Indian rulers with the merchants. Trade conducted by Indian rulers and merchants was totally uprooted. The king of Canada, for instance, used to trade on the send his vessels laden with commodities to Cambay and Hormuz. He imported horses from the above mentioned places, though this was identified by the Portuguese as a monopoly item. Next is trade and production, how they trade and how they produce the things. In view of greater demand for pepper, the cultivators strove to increase the production. It is calculated that the production of pepper in the Malabar area went up by 200 to 275% in the period between 1515 and 1607. Means they increased their production of the pepper at that time. And it is rather difficult to make a comparison and assert with certainty the exact percentage of increase in production. Next is the Indian rulers and the European companies. How the Indian rulers treat with the European companies when they entered. Because have you heard about the European companies just like East India Company, French, Dutch, they entered into India for their trade purposes. And after fulfilling their desires, they settle over here to ensure smooth sailing of Indian ships. It was necessary for them to align with one or the other part of the European who were masters of the seas. Mughals were very much strong. The European merchants followed the policy of seeking concessions through their petitions and the presents. The companies also combined trade with diplomacy with war and control of territory where their factories were situated. At the time of entry of European companies in India, they request for something and they impose for all the things, and they after the imposing the things they monopoly and they concession and they all things they took advantage of they took advantage of saying yes of the Mughal rulers at that time. Next, after English East India Company, the Dutch. In 1600, English East India Company came to India, and in 1602, the Dutch East India Company was formed through a charter. The Dutch were primarily interested in spice trade. Same, they paid more attention to the Far East. India was just a trading depot for them. They established their first factory in Pettapalli in North Coromandel in 1606, followed by another in Masulipattnam in the same year. They established their factories at Pulikat in 1610, established their factory in Cambay, Surat, Agra, Hariharpur, Patna, Decca, Udaiganj, and so on. The Dutch got favorable response from the rulers of Golconda. They granted them concessions to trade on payment of 4% custom duty on their exports and the imports. Next, the English came to India after Dutch, because we have talked about Dutch, and the company was also given exemption. The company, which company? The Dutch company was also given exemption from duty on cloth. How much they have given exemption? About near about 12% duty on cloth. In 1612, the duty of 4% was commuted into a fixed payment of 3,000 pedagogues annually. Means when Dutch entered into India and the Portuguese entered into India and the East India Company entered into India. But after these all companies, the English East India Company stable in India at that time, and they ruled near about more than 200 years. English East India Company. Next, English East India Company Association of Adventurers was formed to trade with the East. This company, in 1608, the English merchants decided to open their first factory at Surat. In 1619, they succeeded in establishing factories at Agra, Ahmedabad, Broch. In South India, English opened their first factory at Masulipattnam in 1611. In 1626, another factory was opened at Aramgaon. In 1639, they got Madras on lease from the local Raja. After that, they fortified it, which came to be known as Fort St. George. They acquired the island of Bombay in 1668, fortified it soon after. It was soon to supersede Surat. They seized Surat as the headquarters of company on the western coast. Sir Thomas Roe. In 1615, this was sent to Jahangir's court and he tried to take advantage of the naval weakness of Indian rulers because they knew about the naval weakness of Indian rulers. They harassed the Indian traders and the ships. And these pressure resulted in the issue of another farman by which the English merchants got right to open factories in all parts of Mughal Empire. The English success led to an English-Portuguese conflict. Between English and Portuguese conflict, and in these conflicts, the English got success at that time, 1620 to 1630, to advantage of English. And after this, during Aurangzeb reign, we noticed some changes in Mughal East Company relation. How? By this time, the English company with fortified settlements at Madras, Bombay, felt stronger. The rulers of Golconda also maintained friendly relation with the English company. That's why they got benefit. They got benefit to open the companies in Mughal India. In 1632, the ruler of Golconda issued a farman by which they were allowed to trade freely in the ports belonging to Golconda on the payment of 500 pagadas, irrespective of volume of trade. This certainly gave a great boost to English trade in the Coromandel region. That's why they got benefit with this. Next is French. The French were latecomers to Eastern trade. The latecomers, who were latecomers? The French were latecomers to the Eastern trade. The French East India Company was founded in 1664. The first French factory was established in Surat in 1668. And in 1669, the French established their second factory at Masulipatnam. In 1673, they got Pondicherry. And 1674, the Nawab of Bengal granted them a site near Calcutta, where in 1690 to 92, they built the town of Chandranagore. The French had to face the wrath of the Marathas in Shivaji. The French had to face the wrath, the angers of Marathas as early as 1677. French commander, later Director General of French Affairs in India, Martin. Martin was readily acknowledged the authority of Shivaji and agreed to pay him an amount of in the lieu of license to trade in his dominions because they wanted to trade in the dominion of the Marathas and in Marathas, especially at the time of Shivaji. Shivaji accepted the French request on the condition that they would not participate in military operations against him. Means they will not treat any military operation against Marathas. On behalf of this, that time Shivaji accepted the French request. Got the permission to fortify Pondicherry. The French also succeeded in getting a farman from Aurangzeb as early as 1667, in which to open their factory at Surat. In 1667, Aurangzeb has given the farman all over India to open their factory for French. In 1688, the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb ceded Chandranagore village to the French. The French maintained close ties with Dost Ali and Nawab of Carnatic. Have you heard about Carnatic Wars? The three Carnatic Wars held at that time were fought between French and the English. And between these, in these wars, the English had won the wars and they maintained their trade in India, and the French had to go. The French maintained close ties with Dost Ali and Nawab of Karnataka. On the basis of a strong recommendation by him, the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah issued a farman granting permission to the French to mint and issue gold and silver currency bearing the stamp of Mughal Emperor and the name of place of minting at that time. Means how they took advantage. How they took advantage, who? The French, the English, and the Dutch, and the Portuguese. How they took advantage means, if you have heard about the Portuguese had ceded all the sea routes, and they have taken their right. They have given their rights on the all the sea routes as French, English, Dutch, and Portuguese, and they have taken advantages. And on these advantages, they have ruled. And in French, English, Portuguese, and fourth one is Dutch. The English East Indian Company stabled in India. Only East India Company stabled in India, not the French, not Portuguese, not Dutchess. We have covered Unit 12 and 13. In our next class, we will cover Unit 14 and Unit 15 in our next class. Thank you.